Hi, I'm Wendy. Welcome to my gardening vlog. I live in Vancouver, Canada, on the West Coast, which is in the Pacific Northwest of North America, and I garden in Zone 8B. Gardening on the coast can be a bit of a challenge because though it's warm, you don't get the heat that you get in 8B if you live in the southern United States or even in the prairies where there are much lower zones. I grew up in Saskatchewan, which I think is a Zone 3, but the warm weather crops there do really well because you get scorching hot temperatures in the summer. That's not the case here. It rarely goes above 20, maybe for a week it gets to be 25. 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit doesn't ever get really much warmer than that out here. And though the winters are mild and you can grow kale all year round, we get pretty tired of eating kale come spring, and we want to be able to grow the tomatoes and peppers and eggplants that are really a big challenge to grow. I hope you follow along with me as I explore how to do this every year, looking for new innovations to make those plants thrive. Please post in the comment section if you have ideas or tips or tricks. We'll be growing cherry tomatoes like I always do. They do great. But the bigger beefsteak tomatoes, I'll be trying a whole bunch of different things to try and get them in a bit of a warmer zone. And peppers as well. We're gonna build a bed and put it on a rooftop and see how that goes. So I hope you'll follow along with me. Okay. Hi, today's video we're going to take a look at my backyard and see the garden waking up in spring. A couple of weeks ago there was still snow on the ground. Now it's the last week of March and the spring everyone's been waiting for has finally come to pass, and the garden is waking up and things are starting to emerge from the ground. So I'll give you a tour, we'll get an idea of what my garden looks like, and then throughout the season we'll be able to see how things progress. So come along on a tour. So first I want to show you our lot, or my backyard space. It is a pretty standard city lot, not on the huge side. I think we are 108 by 33 is the dimensions of it. And as you can see, there are a couple of raised beds there, not a ton of space. My water table is extremely high, and so anything growing you can see in that area there that's not in a raised bed is super swampy in the wintertime. So everything everything that grows in that swampy area, very little will grow in that swampy area. You can see that I have a covered bed there. I've partially uncovered it because it's a pretty nice day out today, and we'll go down and have a look at what's growing there and also at the other parts of the yard. Moving from that yard, I'm on the deck, so I'm looking down, and you can just see that there's another bed there, and those are the stairs. And then over to the side, there's another sort of bed along the pathway. So you can see this bed, this covered bed. In the morning time at this time of year, I sort of open up the ends so that we can let the plants acclimatize, and it's not so cold in the daytime anymore, so we can let some light in. I've put these covered beds together in January, and I'm just opening them up at the ends now. So I have taken back the plastic, and you can see there's a few rows of things planted. There's some onions over here on the right, and here we have a row of lettuce, radishes, and spinach. So zooming in, you can see the spinach is over here and the lettuce there, and there's one radish, another one. So you can see that I planted the lettuce and the radishes at the beginning of February and the spinach at the beginning of March, and that there really is no meaningful difference in the size of them. You know, the lettuce and radishes are definitely not ahead of the spinach. Just get in there a little bit. So the spinach, you know, compared to the size of my finger, it's just maybe twice as high. The lettuce, same thing. So, and the radish is just at the 2-leaf stage, and you can see the slugs have probably, or something has eaten a little bit of that. So really no meaningful difference. I didn't get any benefit out of planting them early. There's also some onions that I transplanted from another bed, and they're doing fine under cover. They were onions I planted last fall. Then there's a little chard plant that I'll show you again from the other side that overwintered in this bed. And again, I said before that kale overwinters. Well, chard also overwinters, and this undercover one is not really doing any better, and maybe even a little bit worse than the one that's in the open ground. So you can see there's the little chard that's in the open ground with some flowers that are just about to come into bloom beside it, and it's no worse for wear than the one in the greenhouse. Both of them I have put down straw in this particular area to keep the weeds down until I figure out what I'm going to plant. Another trick to keep the slugs at bay is this tape. It's copper tape, or you could use copper wire, that you put along the top of the garden bed. Now, if you look it up online, you'll find many people saying there's no scientific evidence that this works at all, but I think it does, and obviously lots of other gardeners do, because there's no shortage of suppliers of this particular material. The tape comes on a roll and is available. I got it from Lee Valley, but I suspect you can get it online, and it just comes in a roll and is sticky on one side, though I have stapled it down because the glue on the sticky side doesn't last very long, so I've just reinforced it with staples. And in this bed you can see that the broad beans that I planted are just starting to come up. Again, they've been under cover in the night, but I open it up during the day. But broad beans are probably okay planted outside. This gives them a little bit of a head start because it's really not very warm outside yet. Moving from the beans, you can see there's the staircase. And there's the other bed. And I'll head over to the bed closest to the house, it's kind of a raised bed. We've put bricks around it and amended the soil. Again, the water table is so low in the yard that this grass is pretty swampy, and the water drains down into here, so I'm actually surprised that grass is still alive, because it's pretty much mush when it rains. So there's the side bed over there, and this bed here. There are the strawberries, and again the railing. This is the only non-raised bed that I have, and in it there's some strawberries, and there's some other perennials planted. There is rhubarb over here that's just getting some really great big leaves starting to come out. I'm not sure how it's going to do in this location. It doesn't get a ton of light here, but we'll see how it goes. This is the only bed, and over here there is asparagus, but it has not yet started popping up. Probably that'll be in another couple of weeks if the weather keeps up. And on the other end of the strawberries and asparagus and rhubarb we have, I've planted some peas. And the peas are just starting to come up. There's just a couple of them that, I don't know if you can see that. They're just starting to poke through. There's one there. There's one there. There's another one there. They're just barely starting to poke through. So we'll see how they do compared to the ones that I've started inside. And a couple of perennial bushes. There is a great oregano plant here. The settlers of this neighborhood were Italian, and this house was built just after World War II in 1946. And somebody must have planted this great rosemary bush, which doesn't usually survive in 8B over the winter. But this bush is probably 60 years old and has been here for a long time and is still doing just fine. The soil, the pH is probably a bit off for it, so I did lime the soil earlier this year, and so hopefully that will help it out a bit. But it's not, it may be suffering a little bit from the cold. I think it used to be closer to the house. We renovated a few years ago and it's not quite as protected, but it's still doing just fine. Beside it is a currant, which is just coming into leaf there and will flower shortly after. And then on the other side, there's some, of course, flowers down here, some heather that's in bloom right there. And then at the other end of the bed, there is a salmonberry, which is native to this area. And you can see that the salmonberries, or that the blossoms, are just coming out on the salmonberry. And there'll be this beautiful, luscious pink color. And they've really just actually started to open quite a bit today because of the warm weather here. Let's focus in on those. Now, over here beside one of my raised beds, there's some allium that's just coming up. It will blossom these beautiful purple flowers around Mother's Day in a couple of weeks, or sorry, in a couple of months. And over here is a bed. It's not a huge bed, it's about 4 by 4, and in it is some lettuce that survived. I planted it in the fall and it was doing just perfect all winter long until we had a late snowfall at the, I think, first week of February. Hadn't had any snow before that, and that's quite unusual for this area. Usually if it's going to snow, it does it around December, and it definitely only snows every 3 or 4 years. Decided to snow in February this year, and again in early March, which kind of took all of the gardeners up for a surprise. But now it's finally warmed up, and things are just raring to go. The fruit trees were actually almost in bloom in some places when the snow hit, and so that we'll see how they fare and whether that impacts the fruit or not. So you can see that some of the lettuces that I planted still managed to survive despite the snow, and I've planted some radishes in among there, and they'll hopefully come up in a couple of weeks. Here we've got a Helleborus that's in beautiful full bloom. It's actually kind of nearing the end of its life cycle. These usually come into bloom somewhere in January, February, and are kind of wrapping up right now, and they come in either this pinky color or a white, I think maybe a yellow as well. They're quite lovely. And then, of course, heather. Heather blooms in this region most of the year. You can get, there's heather clubs that you can get heather so that it's blooming at pretty much all season, but this one's obviously in full bloom now. I've given all of the heather some lime. Most of the soil doesn't really need lime, but I've given the heather some to help it along. There's a couple down here in what I told you before was the swampy area, and they're not really faring very well. I did give the soil some lime for them as well, but I'm not sure that that's going to help them, because I really think it's probably the drainage more than the soil. So there's one there and another over here. And here is my dwarf apple tree. Again, the soil is probably a bit swampy here for the apple, but it did produce a couple last year, which was the first year that I had it. So it was about a 3-year-old tree at that point. It did not produce the year I planted it, but I think that's pretty standard for apples. But it's a dwarf apple, so it won't get a lot higher than it is currently. And behind it is a little bed where I'm going to, in the later season, transfer that plastic support system that I showed you earlier, and I'm going to plant peppers and tomatoes in there so that they've got a little bit of a microclimate that's warmer than the rest of the yard. Thanks so much for joining me today. Next time I'm going to have a look at the seedlings inside, and we're going to transplant some of them, getting ready for the spring garden.